Hey there, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with this week's stocks to watch for trading and investing. I want to wish everybody out there a very happy Easter. Hope you have a fantastic holiday. Um, let's talk a little bit about the markets. We had a nice little bounce on Friday, but there is still a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in order for the bulls to retake control. Right now, bears are in control. Nice little bounce, but not a lot of volume there. So, I think we might have some rough times still ahead. Markets are still guilty until proven innocent. But next week will be a telling week. I mean, and look, if we can reclaim some moving averages, if we can do that with some volume, maybe the bulls can retake control. We're gonna have to keep an eye out for what sectors where we could see rotation. Mentioned in last week's video, uh, or actually in last week's blog, that one of our members was pretty focused on a lot of the staples, right? Consumer staples, and they had a very nice bounce last week. We'll see if that gets some follow through, get some money rotating out of this, momentum tech plays into maybe what could be considered some value, multinational type plays. So we did see a bounce there, and I think that's a sector you want to keep an eye on. Before I get into the list of stocks to watch, we reduced the price of the annual membership to $197 a year, not a month, not a week, $197 a year. We've got a great group of guys and gals, day traders, we've got swing traders, investors, we've got the whole gambit, and we all have a live open mic chat room where it's not just you listening to me, it's everyone that has the ability to chime in, bring people's attention to stocks they're watching. We talk about these things. It's really a tremendous service. You got my swing trade plans, my long term hold plans, and we point out day trading opportunities. But and a couple of the members actually share when they jump in and what they're looking for in targets and jumping out. But check us out, man. $197 a year. It's ridiculous. All right. Let me get right into before we get into the stocks to watch. Let's take a look at the markets themselves, the indexes, and what I'm looking at here. So bots is a it's a space that I like. I think artificial intelligence, robotics is. I think we're in the infancy stages of these things, but as the Nvidias and some of these big momentum tech names pull back, we could see some pullback in bots and robo. Those are my two that I really like. There's another one, I believe it's AIEQ. It's another ETF, artificial intelligence that I like. But as some of these high flyers start to pull back, we could see more weakness in those names. But I think those are sectors that you want to keep an eye on for potential support to put into your long-term portfolio once you get down to an area where maybe we've got some real support for long term. All right, so let's take a look at the Nasdaq. Right, we actually had that little bounce, but look at where we closed. We're below the 50-day, we're below the 20-day, we're below the 100-day, right, and we're just hanging above the 200-day. Now, I could very easily see us going down and testing that 200-day level, and potentially even piercing through it just to test these recent February lows. So, we're in a short-term downtrend here. We've got a potential double top formation on the daily time frame. So, you got to be careful out here with the Nasdaq. But like I said, if we can reclaim these moving averages, we can take out that short-term trend line with some authority, with some volume, then maybe the bulls retake control. But we'll have to see how this plays out. Let's talk about gold, because I see a lot of people talking about gold and potential bounces. That could be the place to be. And I got to tell you, we've now tested this area one, two, three, 4 times and have not been able to take out this 128. Let's call it 128.50, 129 area, right? We gapped up a couple days right into there and did not. We failed once again, and now pulling back. Now, if the market really rolls over, flight to safety, could that be a place to go? It certainly could. GDX, GDXJ, if gold winds up taking out that level, then maybe we've got some opportunity in that space. But for right now, I think you need to be somewhat cautious in that area. IBB, let's take a look at that. Where did we had the little bounce? Where did we find resistance? We found resistance right there at the 200-day. So, we've got the previous low right around 101, right? In February, could we go down and test that? That's possible. But if we can retake the 200-day, we can retake the 50-day moving average, maybe things are turning around there. But we'll have to see if we can take out that trend line, take out the 200-day, and close above those areas of potential resistance. IWM below the 100-day, right? Below the 100 EMA, below the 50-day. A lot of work overhead. The 20-day, got a trend line here that we're going to be coming up against. We could test the 200-day as support. If that doesn't hold, likely retest the recent lows. IYT, a little bit of a bounce there, but where are we? We're right below the 100 EMA. We've got a lot of moving average resistance overhead. So lots of work to be done in order for the bulls to really get bullish, I think, once again. Now, if the IBB breaks down, LABD, which just did a reverse split, sitting right above the 50 EMA. Could be looking at a bounce there. Keep an eye on that one. LABU, sitting right on top of the 200-day. Let's take a look at a couple other things here real quick. I don't want to spend too much time because I got a pretty big list of stocks to watch for next week. Let's look at the SMH. So, SMH sitting on top of the 100 EMA. We're below the 50-day. Could we come down and test this? This is arguably one of the strongest sectors out there. Could we come down and test the $100 mark, which, a lot of times big round numbers can act as support. We could test that. If that doesn't hold, then I think potentially we come down, we test the 200-day moving average. S&P 500, where are we? Right on top of the 200-day. We managed to hold that, pretty impressive. If we break below it next week, where do we test? We test previous February lows. Now, the big concern here is, do we just test it? Could we pierce it? Where do we close? Do we close back above that low? Maybe we go down, we test it, and then we get a reversal, close back above that low. And then maybe we've got a double bottom test and see if we can get some pop to the upside. But, 200 days is going to be a big deal. And then this previous low is also going to be a big deal. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. Specific sectors, TVIX, UVXY. I didn't put it on the blog, but I'm talking about it now. If the markets do roll over, if we take out that 200-day, you might have some short-term trading opportunities in the volatility plays. TVIX, UVXY, VXX is another one that you could play. TZA, right? If the IWM really breaks down, maybe you look for TZA for a short-term trading opportunity intraday. And then if you hold anything on those, because it's really meant to be short-term trading vehicles, you hold lottos, right? You book some profit, you hold some lottos, and maybe carry it into the next day. USO, acting really good. I got to tell you, one of the sectors that I like quite a bit is the energy space. Oil has had a pretty significant move, and a lot of the energy names haven't really responded. So maybe there's a little catch-up play there to keep an eye on. If we could take out 1325, 1350 with some significance next week in the USO, I think maybe then you get some follow-through in some of these energy names. So keep an eye on that space. UUP is another thing we want to keep an eye on because coming up into an area of potential price resistance, if you start to get a really strong dollar, that's going to put some pressure on those multinationals that I talked about earlier That's something and could put some pressure on stocks. So it's something we need to kind of keep an eye on, the strength of the dollar. All right, let's take a look at some specific sectors. XAR, which is the aerospace defense sector, flirting with the 50-day, trying to get it. We are in just a short-term downtrend. See if we can take back and reclaim the 50-day, close above it. Home builders below the 200-day, below a long-term trend line, trying to get back above there, but in a downtrend, right? So basically, we popped right up into this downtrend line a couple of times, 3 times, haven't been able to break through it and hold above it. So let's see if that continues. Financials, right? Rising rate environment. You would think financials would be doing much better. Couple of weeks, we got earnings that will kick back off again. Now, we could be just in this choppy range for the next couple of weeks. Choppy range to downside next couple of weeks until earnings kick off. And financials typically start that whole thing off. You know, we are at a double bottom test. This is the February low. We're at the 200-day. Potential for support. Could be an interesting spot to find support for the financials, but if we wind up breaking below this low and the 200-day, that would be problematic. XLI Industrials sitting right on top of the 200-day, below the 50-day, near testing the recent February lows. XLP, so here's the consumer staples that I was talking about, and it had quite a nice little run last week, right? Think Procter and Gamble, think Kimberly Clark, think Kraft Heinz, think Altria, all these big consumer staple type stocks that have, if you look at them, their charts, their daily and weekly charts are not pretty, but they could be in areas where we start to see some value investors entering those names. So keep an eye on that. XLV. Healthcare, below the 200-day. Consumer discretionary, above the 200-day, looking like potentially we come down and test the recent February low, which could also coincide with the 200-day moving average. Metals and mining, bouncing off of the 200-day. Let's see, retail actually held up fairly well, testing the February lows. XOP, right, a little bit of a bounce on Friday, testing the 50-day simple moving average, potential flat top breakout there. I do like the look of energy. So, look, next week, overall, I think we need to be very cognizant of what's happening in the specific sectors. Tech, I think, is going to be maybe still challenged. You got Tesla, which is going to have an update about their production this week. That could impact Tesla, which actually had a pretty nice little bounce on Friday. Netflix. Let's see. Actually, Tesla, hold on a second. Not on Friday. On Thursday. Right? Had a little bit of a bounce. Gap to fill on the daily. If they miss their production guide, that could put more pressure on the stock. Netflix had a nice little bounce on Friday, right? And one to potentially keep an eye on for little snapback plays. But that's it. That's my take on the markets. That the caution flag is still out. Bears are still in control. A lot of work to do for the bulls to take back control. Okay? All right, let's get into the list of stocks to watch for next week. Galt, 31 million shares in the float. Nice little pop on Friday. Did manage to close above this short-term trend line and above the 50-day moving average. Looking for a potential day trade on this, like a red to green pullback to $4.50. Could act as support for a little bounce. Good volume on Friday. See if we get a follow through there. They have some potential catalysts with the FDA that could be coming up. So, biotechs, we see what can happen with biotechs, right? You get a bad phase 3, bad phase 2 data, boom, the thing opens up, what was it? EDG, Edge. Look at Edge, right? $17, beautiful formation on the daily. and bad news, and the thing opens in the dollar and change range. So got to be very careful with these biotechs. That's why, especially with some that may have catalysts that are right on the in the near future. Galt is one to keep an eye on, though, for a potential short-term trading opportunity, red to green move. SHSP, this had a little bit of a pop on Friday, 5.1 million shares in the float, tiny floater, not a lot of volume, 150,000 shares traded hands on Friday. But pretty nice little formation that it just broke out of, right? And if you put a longer term trend line, we just broke out of some fairly significant resistance and closed above it. But now what we look for is what acted as resistance, see if it acts as support. So maybe a pullback to $6 or 575 or so, see if that holds the support for a little bounce, little intraday day trading opportunity. NPTN, semiconductor name, nice pop on Friday. MACD looking like it might, MACD Histo looking like it might go positive. Decent volume, 2.3 million shares, closed above the 200-day moving average. Maybe what we look for here is a pullback to 650 or the 200-day. See if that acts as support for an intraday setup for a bounce. Little day trading opportunity there. HAIR. So this is a recent IPO that actually just reported earnings, I think. It had a nice little run into earnings, reported earnings, pulling back, testing the 50-day as potential support. You got the 50-day, and you got potential price support right around 550. Maybe we get a pullback to $6, see if that holds as support for a bounce. Decent volume, 228,000 shares traded hands on Thursday, 16.5 million shares in the float. So it's a fairly small float. Maybe you look for a pullback to 6 and we go back up and test somewhere in the 7 and change area. Look for some volume there. CERK, CERK, biotech name, 10 million shares in the float, 12% short interest. Pierced below the 50-day, pierced out of the upper Bollinger Band, had a nice little reversal candle here. Stochastic starting to curl back up, looking for it to take out that trend line and see if we can get another test up in the $5 area. What would be ideal is maybe we get a red to green move, pull back to say $4, see if that holds support for a bounce, take out that trend line, look for some volume. But CERC, pretty good looking setup on the daily time frame. And if you look at the big cup and handle in this name. I love this setup. It looks pretty darn good to me. Maybe retest that 5. But you take that out, you take this area out, this thing could really get a nice pop. So CERK, worth watching. Rocket, another biotech name. Looks like it's building a base to take off from. Rocket. Get it? Base, take off, rocket. Got a gap to fill on the daily. Broke over this longer term trend line. Recent reverse split, 6.5 million shares in the float. Stochastics are a little overbought. We've got MACD, which looks like it's going positive. Maybe you look for on this one a pullback to $18, $17.90, somewhere in that area. Intraday setup, take out 19.20 with some conviction. Got a nice little platform to take off from there. Little potential flat top breakout of that little channel that it's trading in. Worth having on the radar for a potential day trading opportunity. PES, Energy Services Corp, pulled back to the 200-day, and where are we at? Well, we're at an area of potential price support. Acted as resistance, now acting as potential support. You got the 200-day. Stochastic starting to curl up. 66 million shares in the float. Worth keeping an eye on this one. Just had the golden cross. 50 crossed over the 200-day. I think it's worth, especially if energy continues to pick up, right? If that space picks up, PES could be a day trading opportunity, maybe even a higher risk swing opportunity. CBay, another biotech, flirting with the $13 holla. It's been on my radar. Had earnings, were decent earnings, broke over the trend line, closed above that, flirting with the $13 holla. I love those round number rolls. Flirting with the 50-day. Maybe you get a pullback to 1250 or so. See if that holds the support for a bounce. Little intraday setup. Look for some volume. 1.7 million shares traded hands on Friday. 21 million shares in the float. Pretty good looking setup there on C Bay. Sense. What happened with Sense? I'm not sure exactly how Sense got on my radar here. I think I might have. This might have been off of my FinViz scan. Um, it's in an interesting spot, right? So we've got the 50 above the 200 day. It's flirting with the $3 holla. I like round number rolls. Maybe you get a red to green, pull back to say 275 or so. It traded a million shares on Friday, so there's decent volume here. Just tested the 200 day. I think it's got a pretty interesting pattern. It's likely going to have some resistance around 325 or so. See if, maybe, like I said, you get a pullback to 280. You take some off at 319 or so, and then hold a few to see if you can take out that 325 area. But somewhat interesting on SENS. REPR, one of the pro members brought this one up a couple of weeks ago, and I've been watching it, and I brought it up because of an insider buy, which I'm really big on, 190,000 shares between 130 and 139. If you look at where this thing is trying to base out, 130 seems to be kind of holding as support. So it did just pull back and test the 50-day moving average. Maybe on a pullback. This is a higher risk, maybe lotto type play. A pullback to 120, 118, somewhere in that area. Test the 50-day. Could be a little spot to take a little something, something. This traded 71,000 shares, right? So not a lot of volume. You've got to be aware of that. Not a lot of liquidity. So you got to be careful with this type of name. But it's a lottery type play. So with some significant insider buying, it's at least worth keeping on the radar for either a trading opportunity or potentially a high risk swing potential. VCell had a great run. Looking at this one, it did bounce on Friday. This is also a biotech name. Had a big pop. It's been pulling back on lower volume. Could this fill the gap? Yeah, that probably would be an ideal area to look for a bounce. But the 50-day could also act as a bounce and a bounce spot. And then $9, right? So you got a round number. You got the 50 EMA. Got a little bounce on Friday. Maybe you get a red to green move. 36 million shares in the float. 616,000 shares traded hands on Friday. Could be a higher risk swing. Got to make sure they don't have anything coming up that could do damage, right? You don't want any big significant catalyst like a PUFTA or something like that. But worth keeping an eye. I like the setup on the daily time frame. Like I said, gap fill down to 830, 845, 825. Probably a more interesting spot to see if it finds support for a bounce, but worth keeping an eye on it. GTXI, another biotech. I got a lot of biotechs in this week's list, right? It filled the gap to the 50-day. This is an area where it could find some support. Decent volume on Friday. 300,000 shares traded hands. Only got 10 million shares in the float. Looking for it to take out this short-term trend line, maybe get a 20 test, right? 1775 to $20. It's a decent little clip. Got to have some volume. Maybe you get a test, pullback to 1725. See if that holds a support. Little red to green action on GTXI. RDNT, I was watching this one on Friday. I actually almost took it for a little day trade scalp. Nice consolidation on the daily time frame. Took out the $14 holla. Closed above this recent high, and I believe, and I want to make sure here, we are in all-time high territory, right? So we're in blue skies. Blue skies on RDNT. Ideally, maybe pull back to 1350, see if that holds the support for a bounce. Pulls back to 13 even. That could be an interesting spot to take it. 1250 down to the 20-day. I just like the look of this daily quite a bit. It had a great pattern here. Broke out, clean breakout, above the 200-day. Just a good-looking chart. Pull back to 1340, 1350. I think this is really, really attractive for a swing. and maybe you get a red to green on Monday for a pull back to 1385 or so. See if that holds the support for a day trading opportunity. Good volume, 527,000 shares, so lots of liquidity there. Worth keeping an eye on. RDNT. AAXN. This is a smaller float too. 44 million shares in the float. 38% short interest. Big short interest in this name. Reported earnings changed the CEO's compensation package to performance related, stock performance related. I think that's a pretty good positive thing. It's been consolidating since this strong earnings, and looking for this thing to take out $40 with some conviction. Could be a day trading opportunity there. On a pullback to $37, I think it could be interesting to take a swing on at least a starter position. Is there the potential that it comes back and fills the gap? Absolutely, that could happen, right? So, especially if the markets roll over. But look how strong this market has held up in a weak tape. It's held up very strong. So, you look at 37, you get in it. If it doesn't work, if it breaks below 37, maybe you look to get out and look for a re-entry for a swing or longer term hold consideration on a pullback to, say, the 200 or the 50-day, or even if you were to pull back to $30, $29, I think that would be a fantastic opportunity for a swing or long-term hold consideration. MLCO, love this name. Gonna get Macau numbers out this week, and this is one to keep an eye on. Flirting with $30, looking for it to take that out with some conviction. Casino sector is seeing a little bit of weakness because of the whole wind thing, but I like Melco. I actually like several of the casinos. This one, if the Macau numbers, they're expected to come in a little lower, from 20% to I think 16%. If this one pulls back into this $26 area, I think it's a good long-term hold consideration at that level. If it breaks out over 30, I think you've got a potential short-term swing for some follow-through and a potential day trade opportunity. So this has got plenty of volume. 25 million shares in the float. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's not true. I'm not sure what the float is on this one. I thought I had it on here somewhere, but I like Melco. It's more of a swing or long-term hold consideration, though. All right, Switch. They report this week. Now, I did read something pretty interesting. They have done a licensing agreement with one of their partners to license out Switch's highly efficient, patented exterior wall penetrating multi-mode HVAC to others. So, it's a lot, right? But I got to tell you, I've seen these buildings. It is actually the staple of this brand. These huge things that they've got coming off the side of their building. He's got the patent on this technology. A lot of people look at this just as a data center play, but now he's got these patents where he can license out his technology. I think this is a great long-term hold. Full disclosure, I am in it. I own this in my long-term hold account, and I plan to. I would actually love to see this pull back into the 1350 area. I would look to add to my position as a long-term hold play. So they report this week. The other thing that they've got going on is they have a lockup expiration coming after their IPO. So could that put some pressure if you get some insiders selling the stock? It certainly could, but you got a potential catalyst. If we take out $16 with some conviction, we've taken out this long-term trend line. Where do we have some resistance? Somewhere around the $18, $17.50 to $18 area. And we can go back up and test somewhere in the 20 area. So I like Switch, but as a long-term hold, could it be a day trading opportunity? It could. Let's see what earnings present next week. AUDC, communication equipment stock, which that space has been under a bit of pressure. Testing the 200-day as support. You got a long-term trend line here. That longer-term trend line that could act as support. $7 area. Looking for support on this one. Let's back this out to the weekly time frame here. we've got an area of potential resistance on the monthly at about $9. So what I'm looking for here is maybe a pullback to 7 and then take out or go test potentially $9 as resistance. So you've got a pretty good support area here. You got price support. We bounced off that on Thursday. Let's see if that can continue to hold. Maybe we get a pop. Stochastic starting to curl up. I think it's worth having on the radar. Small float. Small float. I want to reiterate that. Only traded 29,000 shares on Friday. So not a lot of liquidity there. Higher risk in terms of looking at that one as a potential swing because of that small float. Or I shouldn't say small float, but thin trading volume. All right. RVP. It's been on my radar for a couple of weeks now. Got a golden cross that just happened. CEO bought 2 million shares, 89 cents. We're sitting at $1. $1 holla. It's had a little trouble getting above there and staying above there. There is a gap to fill to up to about 125. These guys, I think, have earnings coming up. Make sure you check with all these stocks to see if they have earnings coming up next week, or not soon, right? So a significant amount of insider buying. I like seeing that. I like the way it's holding above the $1 holla. Could be a high risk swing. Could be a day trade if you could take out 110 with conviction and with some volume, some kind of catalyst. But, MACD Histo looking like it might go positive. Stochastic starting to curl up. Traded 236,000 shares on Friday. It's only got 14 million shares in the float. So worth keeping an eye on RVP for a trading opportunity. Day trade. Skin reports, Strataskin Sciences, SSKN reports. Now, these guys, I think, need to raise capital. It's maybe found some support in the 109, 110 area, looking for a bounce. Could be a catalyst off of earnings. We'll have to see. If it gaps up to 149, you're probably going to have to sit on the sidelines and see if we get some kind of a pullback to an area of potential support for a bounce. But I wouldn't chase this, right? This traded 31,000 shares, 2.5 million shares in the float, small floater. This might have been the last earnings report here where they get a big pop, and look at what it did. It faded all day and then for the next few days. So be careful here, but could be a potential day trade there. KMI, more of a swing, long-term hold. 1.9 billion shares in the float. Thick stock. Been some insider buying all over the place in KMI. Much higher prices. And if oil and gas can find some stability as a sector, let's back this out to the weekly time frame. This could be an area of potential support somewhere in this, 1450 area. Could it come back down and test this 1150 area? Absolutely, right? That could happen. So, Director bought some at $21, 700,000 shares. Insiders buy have bought from 1532 to 2743. I mean, and we're here at $15, right? So for a long-term hold consideration, this one is one I am keeping an eye on. So I have an alert set at 1460. It breaks below there, then maybe I'm looking for that 11 and change test for support. But if we can take out this trend line and get back above the 20-day, we could be looking at a test up into 1660, $17 area, maybe even go back up and test that 200-day at around $18, right? So, like I said, thick stock, more of a swing or long-term hold consideration, but worth having on your radar, especially if that sector, that space starts to pick up. Pandora. So Pandora we've got Spotify doing their IPO on Tuesday, I believe. And Pandora, now we've got something to if it's a successful IPO, you've got something to base valuation off of for Pandora, right? So worth keeping an eye on this one as a sympathy play if you can't get into Spotify, but if they have a successful IPO, worth keeping an eye on Pandora. Thick, it's not super thick, but it is thicker. And actually, the opportunity to buy this may be on a pullback to this 50-day, around 475 or so. Sirius Satellite Radio buying a portion of this company at 10 and over $10, I believe, a share. So there is a big gap to fill on the daily. I think Pandora is one to keep an eye on. And if you can get it somewhere in the 5 to 450 area, that could be an ideal entry in Pandora. SMG, I want to, so we're coming up into the season now. SMG had a bad quarter, and typically it is their bad quarter. And I want to actually point something out here on April, May, June, right? Here's April, May, June 2017. Look at what SMG did. It was not a good 3 months for SMG, right? And if you go back on the weekly time frame, you'll notice that April, May, June, April, May, June is typically not a good 3 months for SMG. Now, I bring this up because I bring it up as a long-term hold play. I think it's a cannabis sector play, and I think that the ideal entry for a long-term hold consideration on this would be closer to the 200-week moving average, closer to maybe $80. That could be a place where you look to start building a position. Look, this has got a beautiful long-term uptrend. I think it's a good spot. There was a negative piece in Barron's about Canadian pot companies. That could impact the pot space this upcoming week, saying that they're overvalued. Maybe SMG continues. We've already identified April, May, June, not great 3 months for, and that was, you could look back. April, May, June has just not been a good 3 months for SMG. So that could happen again. But we get down into the $80 area, I think it becomes pretty compelling as a potential long-term hold starter heading into what is typically their good season. If you look at April, May, June, then look what it did for the rest of the months, right? It gets a nice little run up. And that is a pattern that has been consistent with SMG. So keep that in mind. Long-term hold consideration. Yoga reports, I think on Monday or Tuesday after the close. Gonna have to look and verify that. It's on the blog. But this has got an interesting look. It's been consolidating and basing between 250 and $3. They report good earnings. Maybe we get a good pop over $3. That's a nice potential flat top breakout. Where can we go? Maybe we get a pop up into 330, 350, somewhere in that area. Worth having on the radar. Yoga, 7.3 million shares in the float. Traded 9,000 shares. So look, a lot of liquidity issues there. Don't chase, but if it's got some real volume off of a good earnings report and guidance, this one could be one to watch as a low float play for a little short-term trading opportunity. ARMC, nope, I must have put that on wrong. Hold on a second. Maybe it's AMRC. Hold on. AMRC, my apologies. Sometimes I do the dyslexic thing. AMRC got a great looking setup on the daily. AMRC, put that back in the list. Pop on Friday, good volume, 380,000 shares, 20 million shares in the float. Let's back this out to the weekly time frame. It's up several weeks in a row, right? And it is at an area of potential price resistance, $13. So we could see it pull back, but it was a pretty nice little breakout on Thursday. Maybe you look for a red to green, pull back to 1230, see if that holds support, but pretty nice looking setup on AMRC. Day trading opportunity there. All right, let's keep moving on here. All right. FNJN, they report on, I think, Thursday of next week. Got the Golden Cross that just happened. This is a small float, 8.3 million shares in the float. Got a kind of a cup with a little handle formation here, looking for a break over 350, which is on the weekly time frame an area of potential resistance. So big area to try and get through. Potential day trading opportunity on a break over 350. BBOX, ugly chart long term. Big gap to fill potentially on the daily. Looks like maybe finding a bottom. This could be a double bottom bounce right around $1.90 or so. It's going to have some resistance. Got to take out that trend line. You got to take out some moving averages. But for a day trading opportunity, it's got 10 million shares in the float, 100,000 shares traded hands on Friday. Not a bad looking setup here for a bottom bounce, right? So bottom bounce, take out that long-term trend line. Insider buys at much higher prices. Kind of interesting. They announced a contract recently. I think it's at least worth keeping an eye on. BBOX. MBII news after the close on Thursday. Trying to hold 2 as potential support. Pulled back and tested the 20-day as a bounce spot. And I'm not sure if this, it got a little bit of a pop on Thursday after the close. We'll see if it gets any follow through. But this has already had a pretty nice run, right? It's already had a pretty nice run. Maybe pull back to 160, 150, see if that acts as support for a bounce, right? Day trading opportunity there if they have some real volume, at least worth having on the radar. I think it was earnings, and I think they were better than expected. So worth keeping an eye on that one. ALDX is the last one of my list. Another biotech name that pulled back to the 100-day. I think this one has a potential catalyst coming up as well. Maybe look for $7 to act as support for a little bounce. Could be a day trading opportunity. Not crazy about the way the stochastics are curling to the downside or MACD histo. This is probably my least favorite biotech of all the ones that I had on the list, but I think it's at least worth having as on the radar for potential bounce in this area. All right. I'm just going to briefly look through my list here, make sure I didn't miss anything. It doesn't appear as though I did. Going to be an interesting week. Could be a defining week, right? Right now, caution flags are still out. Things could change. Bulls could take control if we can get over some moving averages with some significant volume. But right now, still concerned that maybe we need to go retest those recent February lows. All right, that is it. Thanks for joining me. I hope this was helpful. I hope you found something of use, maybe an idea, whether you're a day trader or a swing trader or a long-term investor. I think there's a little something here for everybody. So I hope you found something useful. Come check us out over at alphawolftrading.com. Pro membership, you get 10 hours of educational programming. You get my trade plans before I take the trades. You get a live chat room with an open mic, unless, for some people that might be attractive. For others, you might be shy and not want to talk. But hey, that's okay. You can just put your little microphone on mute and you don't have to talk. But come check us out, man. $197. That's unbelievably cheap. Not about making money from memberships or education. It's about putting together a good community of traders to help each other. That's what it's all about. So come check us out over at Alpha Wolf Trading. Have a fantastic holiday. Happy Easter. And I will see you all. I'll see you next week. Good luck trading next week.